All right, here we go. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Boom, and welcome to the Big Honker Podcast, brought to you by Pacific Game Calls. I'm Jeff Stanfield with the world-famous Andy Shaver.
They will not be at NWTF next week, so you just got to go online if you're wanting anything Pacific Calls related.
Pacific will not be there?
No, I talked to Trevor. They're going to be... It doesn't matter.
Somewhere else.
They're going to be somewhere else, so...
Okay.
All right. I am excited about this one. Messaged you about a year ago, and then you got back to me during waterfowl season, so kudos on you for going that far into your DMs. Wild Turkey Doc on Instagram, Dr. Mike Chamberlain. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Andy. How about yourself?
I am excited. It is, it feels a lot like spring. It's a fall spring here in Texas, but it has got me excited for turkey season.
Me too. I actually looked in the closet this morning, much to my wife's chagrin, and noticed 2 of my vests that were laying up on the shelf, and I started messing with calls, and she's like, "Nope, don't start. Don't even start." So yeah, it's almost time.
I know it's a fall spring here in Texas. It's probably going to be really, really cold in March. Let's talk about that. Well, how does weather affect the birds right now? Because like I said, it's 65, it's sunny, it's beautiful here in Texas. Are birds getting fired up based off of weather, or is it all photo? Is it all amount of sunlight in a day?
Well, you'll see birds that, with kind of warming days in late winter, you'll see some birds that will start acting like they're a bit friskier than they should be. Mostly just toms. The hens are doing their thing, and they're ignoring everything around them, other than they're just trying to survive and build up reserves for spring. So it's mostly photo period driven from a breeding perspective. But yeah, these warm days, you definitely see toms get friskier, and their testosterone levels will increase a little bit. They'll start strutting, gobbling, playing a fool, even though nobody's paying attention, really.
Right. So when do things ramp up? Because I've always heard that peak breeding times are before hunting season, so that some hens can already be bred. Am I explaining that correctly?
Well, it really depends. I mean, in some states that is the case. In other states, it's not, in that the season's open. In some cases, before breeding really even starts. It really just depends. But in a general sense, yes. The idea is to open hunting at a time when a lot of your breeding has already been completed, or at least it's in the process of being completed.
Right, because we open up here first weekend in April every year. Mm-hmm. And I always notice a ton of hens with tom. I still see them in their winter flocks here.
Yeah, and basically what happens is you've got the groups, the big winter groups will start splitting up early March to mid-March, and what they'll go from, say, groups of 20 hens to groups of, say, 8. Mm-hmm. And those groups of hens will have 1 or 2 or sometimes more toms that are shadowing them. Once they get in those smaller groups, that's when breeding usually starts right about that point. But it takes, the breeding season for wild turkeys is not a, hey, it happens over a 2-day period and then everybody starts nesting. I mean, it's a process, and these hens will copulate repeatedly with these toms. It's not just hey, I'm going to breed one time with him and then I'll go nest. That's not really the way the bird works.
Yeah. Turkey hunting, it's one of those things you either are really, really into it or you don't do it at all. I'm really, really into it. Jeff over here, he'll sit for about 15 minutes, and if it hadn't happened, then it's time to go do something else.
Yeah, it's not a fun sport.
But it's so polarizing in that manner that you're either all in on this thing. There's not a whole lot of casual turkey hunters out there, I don't feel like.
No, I agree with you. I'm not around many people that just kind of go
Right.
occasionally and it is what it is. Most people that I meet are either, no, I don't turkey hunt, or yeah, I've been once or twice, or they, hell yeah, I go every time I can. I live and breathe it, and it's all I think about in the spring. So there's not really much in between.
We have an outfit here in Texas, and it's 7 days a week waterfowl season. We start in September with dove hunting, and that's mainly weekends. And then November gets here, and it's 7 days a week chasing ducks and geese. I enjoy turkey hunting so much more because that's kind of my period where, number one, the weather's usually pretty nice. And it's just kind of my relaxation time, if that makes sense. Because I can go out there in the afternoon. I don't have to freeze my balls off. I don't have to be in knee-deep mud. I don't have to set out 50 dozen decoys. I mean, I can just go out there, sit on a stump, and if it happens, it happens. And if not, I got to watch the sunset in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I kind of look at, I've talked about this before. I've been asked about this before. Is like, what is it about turkey hunting that you find so addictive? And I think in some ways it's just the time of year. It's, you go through winter and you're just like, damn, I really need to see the sun. I really need to not be cold, and yeah, you get to go watch the world wake up in a time of year where it's like you're being reborn.
Yes.
Where everything is being reborn. And to me, that's one of the best parts about turkey hunting is, the weather is typically better, but I think it's just, it feels like you're coming out of a fog.
Right.
When you get to turkey season. And it's, I have some good friends and I love to fish, but I'm not a fanatical fisherman. But I have some buddies that's all they do, and they think this, they say the same thing. It's like, will I go bass fish when it's 30 degrees and the wind's blowing? Yeah, you damn right I will. Will I enjoy it? Yeah, I guess. But 2 months later, when it's 70 out and it's sunny, and I just feel like, I'm alive. I feel like I'm being born again. And that's how I look at turkey hunting.
Is there any research being done? Because for a while there, we were waterfowl hunting in southwestern Oklahoma, or north of Altus.
Yes.
Yeah, north of Altus, about an hour. And our first couple of years up there were times where we would be driving by looking for geese, and we would hit the brakes because there'd be so many turkeys in the field. Fast forward about 3 years, they're not there. Like, not only are they not there, there's zero turkeys in some of these places. So obviously there was a big die-off, but nobody can pinpoint what happened.
Know. Yeah, we don't know. And there's actually a research project that has started in Oklahoma and multiple parts of the state that's being directed by Oklahoma State University. But yes, the observation you just shared is one that's not specific just to Oklahoma. The same observations have been conveyed in Kansas and Nebraska and various other states in the Midwest that, my birds are just gone. They're not here anymore. And we don't know what we don't think there is a root cause, like one thing that we can put our finger on. But yeah, that's a common observation, unfortunately. And if you look, Oklahoma and many other states out in the Midwest have started research projects to try to understand what is going on, and they've also made regulations changes the past few years to try to stem the harvest a little bit not understanding exactly why those populations have declined so dramatically.
Do we? It's got to be a man-made problem, don't you think?
Like maybe like a herbicide or a pesticide that they ingested somehow? No?
We don't know. We don't know. And there's a lot of work ongoing right now looking at disease issues, looking at potential pathogens. You know, is there something that these populations are being exposed to that are causing death, causing reproductive failures, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, trying to understand this. And because it's not specific just to even the Midwest. I mean, I talk to people all the time that are in the Southeast or Northeast or Mid-Atlantic, and some of them will tell you, hey, I'm still seeing plenty of turkeys and everything looks good. And then others will tell you, my birds are not here anymore, or they're down half or more than half based on just what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And that's why, to a large degree, I have a job. I'm trying to provide agencies with information on, what is going on with our birds.
I've noticed. I've been in the hunting business for over 30 years, and I've been to in my lifetime, I've been to a lot of places. And when I was a kid growing up, we used to go to around Sonora, Texas, and you would see flocks of 100, 150 turkeys were not that unusual. And there was a lot of them. The deer lease was just full of turkeys. And where there was water, you had lots and lots of turkeys. When I came up here and I started guiding around, our lodge is right on the river. There was turkeys here all the time. You would see 25 to 50 in flocks all the time in the summer and in the fall. We don't see those hardly anymore here. Right. And then in Oklahoma, where we hunted 10 years ago, there was 300, 400, 500 birds in flocks. I mean, huge flocks of turkeys. And now there's 4 or 5 birds there. So everything has happened in the last 10 years. And
yeah,
they want to blame it on the coons, because coons are definitely a problem. There's no doubt about it. There's no fur market no more. But you can go wipe out all the coons, and your turkeys aren't there. And we had coons back in Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone days, and we had tons of turkeys, and we had tons of there wasn't that much fur being taken. So, do you think it's got a lot to do with the varmints?
I mean, certainly predation is part of the equation. When I'm asked this question, whether you're in Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, wherever you're at, your turkey population in your state, in your local area, kind of look at it like it's a football game. And there are positions on the field that influence the outcome of every game, whether it's the offensive line, defensive line, quarterback, whatever it is. So in a turkey world, those would be predation, habitat, harvest, disease, these things that we know influence turkeys everywhere. The relative contribution that each one of those positions has on the outcome differs from one spot to the next. So in one area, maybe habitat loss and degradation are driving the ship, and then maybe 5 counties over, you tack on basically conversion of, say, hardwood forest to pine forest, and that's exacerbating the issues. And so you've got some of these players on the field, if you will, that are impacting the outcome everywhere. But then in some places, you may have positions that only influence the outcome in certain areas, say in one game, in 1 year. And those are the things that are really problematic, such as, could there be pathogens that these birds are being exposed to? Could there be disease issues that popped up from something in the environment? Those are the things that we really struggle to understand. The most influential players in the game, we have a pretty good sense, whether it's habitat issues or predation issues. We know that predators matter. They've mattered forever. To your point, turkeys have dealt with predators for eons. What we do know pretty clearly is at this point, we're seeing many of these predators that are at apex levels. In other words, we have more of them than we've had. Particularly when you look at species like raccoons and coyotes that largely are not persecuted anymore. We don't have fur market for the most part. And then you have species that are impactful to turkeys, like raptors, like birds of prey that are no longer persecuted for obvious reasons and are protected in our society. So from a turkey's perspective, the landscape looks very different than it looked 30 years ago or 40 years ago when we were restoring turkeys. So now I call it a new normal. We're just in a new normal, and we're going to have to try to figure out how to navigate that new reality, which is why there's so much research going on.
So raptors will play a part in turkey? They'll prey on turkeys? Is it just the young ones, or will they nut up and go after a mature hen or something like that?
Oh, birds of prey can be problematic to adults as well. In fact, great horned owls are a very common predator of adult birds. They kill toms and hens.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, they kill them on the roost primarily.
Really? Well, do. They just swoop
very,
down
very
and
common.
just the big talons come into. Like, how do they do that?
Well, owls are badass. If you watch them when they forage, what it appears based on our field observation. So, we'll have a tom that, for instance, is wearing a GPS unit on his back. We're tracking. We know when he stops moving, the unit tells us that he's dead. Mm-hmm. So we go find him immediately. And what it looks like happens is the owl hits the bird in the tree. You see the bird will be, let's say, 30 or 40 feet from the tree that he was roosted in. There's a plume of feathers from where there was contact, and the owl rides the bird to the ground. And in many cases decapitates the bird.
Holy shit.
They're mean as hell.
But not always. But a lot of times they decapitate the bird, and then and if anybody that listens to this has seen this, now if you find a dead turkey laying there that doesn't have a head, that's a great horned owl. Or if they don't remove the head, sometimes what they'll do is once they kill the bird, of course there'll be massive trauma around the neck where they held the bird and killed the bird. But what they'll usually do then is stand on top of the bird's breast, peel the skin back, and then strip the meat from the bird's carcass. What's interesting to me is sometimes they kill the bird and they don't consume any of it.
Really?
So it's not always I'm hungry. This is just my suspicion. This is my speculation, so take it for what it's worth. I suspect what happens is the owl hears, at least with toms, they hear the bird gobbling, and in some cases it's a territorial response. You've got this obnoxious 20-pound bird that's vocalizing in my core area here, and I don't like it, so I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And I think that's probably what happens when you just find, when we go find one of our birds and he's just laying there dead with no head. The owl just attacked him and killed him to do it.
Just a big old vendetta.
They're mean as shit. They also wipe out a lot of pheasants.
Horned owls are crazy. And if you think about a horned owl, they're not huge animals. But if imagine being a turkey and sitting in a tree, and it's just started to get daylight. You're starting to gobble. You feel safer in that tree than any part of your home range, right? That's why they roost off the ground, is because they feel safe there. You have no idea anything's coming after you, and then suddenly you get hit with a ton of bricks, and to me, it kind of makes sense. that owls can be pretty effective predators because they just blindside you.
Yeah.
Whop, you get hit, and the next thing you know, it's over.
One of these places on the river that Jeff was talking about, I noticed it was it wasn't an owl. It was like it wasn't a water turkey, kind of like an egret maybe, but it moved in this piece of property that I've hunted it several years, and I went out there from one year to the next, and where they were roosting that the year before, I noticed this big nest of like egrets, kind of like a crane, but not really. So they moved them out, and they pushed those turkeys a couple miles in on this property. And I mean, I don't know what happened, but obviously there was a territory dispute, and this little fish-eating bird won.
Yeah, and with turkeys, I mean, particularly Rios, their roost are, first of all, they don't have a lot of roost.
Yes.
Rios, unlike say Easterns, have proportionally much fewer roost available to them. And so if you lose one, that's a dramatic possibility for a Rio, because like some of the monitoring we've done of Rios in South Texas, they may only have 2 roosts in their home range. You take one of them away, and that has to influence the bird, because in my world we call it central place foraging, but all it means is they can only move so far from that roost in a day to then return to the roost. So you basically drop a pin on top of that roost and draw a circle around it, and that's the only place a turkey could exist. So you wipe that roost out or occupy it with another animal, I mean, the bird loses. The turkey loses.
I was at the King Ranch, probably early '80s, and driving down the road, but that parallels with the King Ranch going to South Padre, and every they had the big electric lines there, the big metal looking poles.
Yeah,
it's got the bar that comes across the middle, and there's another pole, the real big transformer lines, and every one of them had turkeys roosting on them, every one of them. And I thought, that's a perfect roost. It's a metal deal.
Right.
A predator can't crawl up there. So the only thing that can hurt them is an owl or an eagle. That's it. Nothing else can get to them up there other than lightning. But every one of them, you would see where these turkeys had adapted to getting out of the trees, and they went up to those places. I don't know. They were safer there for sure. I don't think they could have a nest up there, though. But they nest on the ground, don't they?
Yes.
They do. Yeah, they do. And to your point, we've seen that with Rios in areas where they're losing roost sites, and there have been man or woman made roost where you just make a roost for them that's like a telephone pole with slats coming off of it, like a transmission line, like you just talked about, and they will readily use those, which is good, because that the loss of roost sites is a real problem for Rios in parts of their range, particularly with cottonwoods declining, which are a primary roost tree in many parts of Rio range. The loss of cottonwoods is problematic for turkeys in that part of the world.
Why are the cottonwoods going away? Because now that you said that, we used to have them along the river here, and like at one of our playa lakes, all the playa lakes in our area used to have cottonwoods all around them. They're all gone. Are they just a 20 to 50 year tree?
No, there's disease issues that are affecting them. I'm not an expert on what the specifics of it, but the bottom line is there's a disease issue that's affecting cottonwoods.
Because we don't have it. We used to have them.
It's killing them.
Everywhere there was water, there used to be cottonwoods around here. Now that you said that, they're gone. All of them are gone now, and it's been just in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a real problem where Rios are primarily using cottonwoods, which is a lot of the subspecies range.
Well, that tree that I was talking about down where the fish-eating bird took it over, it was a cottonwood tree.
Yes, and it's gone now, I bet you.
No, it's still there.
Is it?
It's
okay.
still there, but yeah, it's the only one in that area. Like, you got to go another mile or so in either direction to find another cottonwood tree. But that's what it was. It was a cottonwood tree, and like I said, I could get up on a bluff. There's a bluff that I can overlook it. And year before, that was the tree. Everything kind of stemmed off of it, and then went out there the next year in March, and I'd be damned, they weren't there. I thought they were all dead. I was like, well, this is great. Now I can't find my turkeys.
Yeah, that does suck.
And that's what I like about Rios is it's consistent. The roost doesn't really ever change that much because it can't.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not going to say that I've never met a turkey that was easy to hunt. Yeah. So don't ever. And I've gotten my tail kicked by Rios just like anything else. But I agree with you. It is helpful when you pretty much know where to start. Now from there, God only knows, but that's one of the reasons I go to the South Dakota and Nebraska every year. Have gotten to be good friends with a guy up there that leases properties. And one of the things I love the most about hunting, particularly in the prairies, is that, you got these little pockets of turkeys, and there may not be birds for 5 miles, but then there's a group of birds, and you pretty much know where to start and where to end. It really, and you can scout those birds. You can almost like I know I used in a previous life, I was about as diehard of a duck and goose hunter as there was. I'm no longer that person, but I wouldn't be married still if I was. But scouting for ducks, that's about as much fun as you can have, and because you find the birds and you're so anticipating the next morning, and in some places you can scout turkeys the same way, and I just enjoy that. Really enjoy it.
So what was it about turkeys? Like how did you fall in this career path where that's your field of expertise?
Literally just stupid luck. So I applied to graduate school, and in my world, most graduate students, you work on a research project of some kind, and you're paid a pittance to conduct field research. The study itself is funded by, say, a state agency or whatever. Well, in my case, I applied, and the professor that accepted me called me, and he said, "You're the top candidate that I have for 3 different projects. So you pick which one you want to work on." So the first one was a wood duck project. The second was a fox squirrel project, of all things. And then he says, "And I've got this wild turkey project," and and he explained it. And I said, "Oh man, the turkeys are the way to go," because I grew up, as I wasn't a fanatical turkey hunter as a kid, but I really enjoyed it. And we fall hunted mostly at that time. Spring hunting was just gaining popularity. Tell you how old I am. So I started studying turkeys, and the first one I caught, that was it. The first time I shot a rocket net over one and ran out there and grabbed it and got to start tracking them with radio telemetry and figuring out how they behave. That was it. And so I did my master's research on turkeys. I then was offered a PhD position studying turkeys and predators, actually, things that eat turkeys. I left graduate school with my doctorate and went to work at Louisiana State University. And one of the first projects that the state agency funded for me or with me was a wild turkey study. And I've been studying turkeys since 1993, every year of my career. I kind of fell into it. And honestly, around the early 2000s, when we thought everything was good with turkeys, agencies stopped funding research projects, and you saw turkey research just plummet. Nobody was doing it, but I was. And it was because, to their credit, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries were interested in continuing to study what at the time was the most popular public hunting area in the state of Louisiana from a turkey hunting perspective. They wanted to keep studying that population, so they kept funding work. And then fast forward to the last decade or so, when populations really started to decline. Suddenly, now I do other work, but 95% of everything that I do is turkey related. So, where are the sections in the nation where the turkey population is stable or even on the rise? The Northeast and the upper Midwest. The Northeast in particular, there appear to be areas where turkeys are doing quite well. There are, if you go out west, some of the states out west are not seeing or not reporting or not seeing the types of declines we're seeing in the South and the East, and particularly in the Midwest as well. I think and this is unfortunate, but one of the things we have never known is how many turkeys are out there.
Right.
We have no clue, and that really hamstrings us because we don't have benchmarks. We do have data that are very compelling, such as number of turkeys observed, per mile driven, or number of poults observed per hen in the summer, which tells you how productive the population is. We have metrics like that, and across much of the species range, those have declined. Those metrics have declined. But then you go talk to someone in, for instance, you go to a spot in Wyoming, and there's so damn many turkeys that their depredation permits are issued to kill them because there's so many birds. You go to parts of the Northeast, which I think is really interesting, and you go to residential areas and suburban areas where turkeys are a problem. There's so many birds that it's a problem. And I've always laughed and said, well, if you could take some folks from the Southeast, some diehard turkey hunters, and we could fix that problem. We can fix that. But I hope that answers your question. Yeah. There are some places where things look pretty good, but there are a lot of places where the declines have been pretty obvious.
Do you think that we just got to a point here in a lot of these places where turkey populations are falling that the ecosystem just could not sustain that population, and that's why we saw the crater?
Yes. Yeah, and in many ways, what has happened in some areas, I'm not going to paint the huge broad brush, right. But we released turkeys decades ago into vacant habitat. Like there were no other turkeys there, and we released them. But think back, I'm 52 years old, and I can remember as a kid, what the landscape looked like. There were hardwood forest everywhere. I grew up in Virginia. There were hardwood forest everywhere, and there were places that I can now drive to that are nothing but a sea of concrete or it was turkey habitat. And I would see turkeys there all the time in places. In fact, right across from the high school I went to, there was a field that I distinctly remember seeing turkeys in that field. And from that spot, which is now a McDonald's, for 15 miles in every direction is nothing but infrastructure now. So I think what we did is we released these birds, and populations were just skyrocketing. And at the same time, our landscape was changing in a negative way. And those populations overshot where they were going to stabilize, which is very common when you release animals into a new environment. And they declined to where they could stabilize themselves. The problem is that level is much lower than where we wanted. So we thought we'd be better off than we are, and we're not. We're lower than we want to be, and in some ways we expected this, but I don't think many in the turkey world expected the populations to decline as they have, which has obviously created a problem for agencies because we don't have the populations at the levels that we want them in a lot of areas.
Are we getting to the point where we're going to cancel spring season in places?
God, I hope not. No, I hope not, and I don't hear any agencies talking about that. Not that I'm, tied in with every agency, but I don't hear that. I think what you're seeing is that agencies are trying to restrict harvest in some situations because they have to do something, and there's only certain things that an agency can do at a statewide level, which is what they manage turkeys at. And harvest is one of those. It's the only thing that they can control at a statewide level. So I think that's why you're seeing, I know that's why you're seeing states that are making changes, and some of them are not popular, such as, dropping bag limits to one bird. I sure hope we don't go down the road of, well, we're just going to discontinue, hunting this bird, because that would just be a catastrophic occurrence.
I saw where last spring the state of Oklahoma had like 15 hens that they put trackers on and stuff, and out of them 15 hens, and I could be off on my numbers a little bit. I think only 2 actually had poults.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah, and I don't remember the numbers either. I saw that work presented. Coulter, one of the researchers running that study, could tell us for sure. But yes, it was like sub 20, let's just say 15, 20 birds. Only 2 of them hatched successfully, which is dismal nest success. If memory serves me, at least based on that 1 year of data, there were a fairly significant number of hens that didn't even try to nest, which is very common in Rios, actually. And depending on rain is good, not in just massive volumes, but precipitation affects Rios unlike any of the other subspecies. When it rains in the winter and early spring and everything's succulent and green, a lot of birds nest because they're in good condition, and nest success is higher. When you go through drought cycles, which, as you know, Oklahoma has had a number, nest success is terrible, and a lot of birds don't even try. Basically, what turkeys do is, when they're in poor condition, a lot of the hens hedge their bets for the next year, because they're supposed to be they're a long-lived bird, relatively speaking. So, she just says, I'm not in very good condition this year. I'll just forgo it, and I'll try again next year. And I think that's what some of the Oklahoma data showed, and we've seen that with birds in Texas. We've been studying birds in Texas for 20 years now, with actually 15 with GPS. You see the same trend. When it's super dry, you see low nest initiation rates, meaning a lot of birds don't try. You see low nest success, and you see poor brood survival, because when what few nests do hatch, the environment is just not conducive to those poults catching a lot of insects and being able to grow really quickly, which is what ensures their survival.
So let's just take an arbitrary number. We'll take 10 hens. What is an exceptional year as far as breeding, raising young? What's average, and what is just abysmal?
So I'll start about the average. So what we generally are seeing across the South is that, and this is I'm going to say this is average, but this is not a good not a good average. Across our populations, we're seeing about 75% of hens will attempt a nest. About 20 to 25% of those will actually hatch a nest. And about a third of those that do hatch produce a poult, 1 or more poults, that lives that first month of life. That's not very good. That's the average, though. A really good year, 90% nest initiation, meaning almost every hen tries. 30+% nest success, meaning a third or more. One of my study sites last year, we had 50% nest success, which is really good. Brood survival is 40-50%, meaning a lot of the hens that hatch are able to make it work and keep at least one of those poults alive for a month or more. And then on the flip side would be like what we just talked about with that single year of Oklahoma data, where you have low nest initiation rates, you have low nest success, think 10%, 15%, something like that. And then you have almost no brood survival. And that's not that's not uncommon in the Rio world, where in certain local areas you either have a lot of production based on precipitation, or you have almost none. And people think, well, that sucks, but yeah, it does. It not only sucks for that year, it sucks for several years, because that lack of production this year reduces the number of jakes you have, and then that reduces the number of 2-year-olds that you have, which are most of the harvest. So this bad year is not just a one and done. It's a bad year that that kind of carries over into subsequent years.
How many, yeah, I mean it's a 3-year deal basically.
So if you have 2 or 3 bad years in a row of no hatches, it don't take long to wipe out all your turkeys. I mean, that's just the common deal here. And it's not like a quail. Like a quail, we can have no quail here, and then one year you can have a big wet summer and spring, and all your quail are at 100% almost of what they've ever been at their peak levels. Turkeys don't come back that fast.
Yeah, that's right. Because bob whites have basically it's called, some refer to it as an ambisexual mating system, where you'll have a hen that lays a clutch, and then she lets the male incubate it, and she goes off and nests again, and either incubates it herself or has another male incubate it. So one female can produce multiple clutches that hatch in a summer. And so they can literally go and they can do what in my world is called exponential growth. Like you can go from just a few to a lot in one growing season. Turkeys don't do that. They produce a single clutch and that's it. So even in a good year, the change in the population status is very modest compared to, say, a bobwhite. And in the turkey world, quail, a good friend of mine that studies quail here at UGA, and the running joke with him is quail are experts at dying. Everything
Yes.
eats a quail, everything kills a quail, and their survival is supposed to be low. I mean, that's being a quail, but turkeys are not. Turkeys are adapted to living numerous breeding seasons so they can hedge their bets and try again. In the quail world, you got to get it. You got to get it while you can, because annual survival is, way, way, way under 50%. So most of your adults every year die.
We were in Michigan along the Lake Michigan, actually, around right on it, and we saw quail. I mean, we saw turkeys everywhere. All the little towns, you'd see, strutting males. It was everywhere, and it's just crazy that when you get up to certain places, their turkey population is booming. And you don't have to go very far to find it where it's just completely wiped out. And that's what confuses me on it being a man-made pesticide deal, because they're spraying the same pesticides up there that they are in Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, Nebraska, Kansas, where the population is declining rapidly.
Yeah, and that, to the point, like I said earlier, that there is not a smoking gun here. There's not one thing that's causing this. And, a couple years ago, a lot of discussion got generated on social media about neonics, basically these, pesticide laden seeds. And, there was a lot of discussion about, well, that's it. No, there are populations declining in areas where that's not even present in the environment. So, I know what we want to do as human beings, because this is who we are as people. We want the problem so that we can identify the solution.
Yeah.
And that is not the way this works. And I wish there was. I wish there were one thing that we could say, okay, stop doing that, or let's do this, and it's going to solve the problem. That's just not the reality that we live in.
So take me to when you put these geo trackers on the birds. When you get your hands on them, do they usually calm down, or is it a rodeo the entire time?
No, they calm down. I mean, as much as a bird that just had a rocket net fired over their back can. I mean, the reality is it's a stressful situation. But
Sure.
What we do, we go to great lengths to try to get the birds handled as quickly as possible. We put a hood on them, a Crown Royal bag, actually, not plugging them, works great, because you can just pull it right over their head, and we don't cinch it up or anything. A piece of a sock works great. You just slide it over their eyes. Once you hood them, they are quite calm. Of course, if you're manhandling them or you're squeezing them or something, that's not good. But usually once they're hooded, you can kind of lay them in your lap. You hold their legs. You keep their legs straight so that they don't bend their legs up under them and try to push constantly.
Right.
If they do that, they can have problems. They'll usually just lay there. And what you want to do with turkeys is try to keep them as cool as possible. Heat is a real problem for turkeys. Cold is not. So when you catch a bird, you know this, you kill a turkey, and 3 hours after you kill it, you start skinning it and steam's rolling everywhere. They are heat ovens. So when you catch them, you want to keep air moving around them. You don't want to hold them up under your arm constantly. And and then they're calm. They're sitting in our lap or on a tailgate. We're holding them loosely. You put the GPS tracker on their back. You kind of tie it to them like a backpack. So you got this parachute cord that goes under their wings and cinches it up on their back. It's loose, so it slides around. It can slide a little bit. It can go up and down. You don't want it too tight. It only weighs 80 grams, so it's nothing to their body weight, and it just sits right between their wings. You let them go, they fly off, and usually everything goes well. It doesn't always go well, but most of the time, if your field crews are well trained and they're doing what they're instructed to do, then everything goes fine.
Yeah. How far will they go when you release them? Do they just kind of go to the next wood line? Are they going to the next property? How far will they get away from that experience?
Just to get away from you.
That's it. That's as far away.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll see these wonky movements where, you release them and they take off and go down the road a couple miles and then they come back. But a lot of times they just get away from the immediate environment, and some of this is when we catch the birds. So most trapping is in the winter when they're in flocks, so we're catching them in at least fairly small, if not huge, large groups. So they're usually will just find each other again and settle right back down and go about their business as they did. And that doesn't take them very long. In fact, a lot of times if you're quiet, which my folks are, when you release the birds, we don't do a lot of talking. Once you have worked together and you're trained well, everybody knows what everybody's doing. There doesn't need to be conversations, and if there are, they're muted. They're very quiet, whispering, hand me that syringe, this whatever. If you listen when you release the birds, a lot of times you can hear them calling each other as soon as they get out of your. They usually fly off. They'll fly off and then they'll land, and they take off running out of your sight. And usually, if you listen, you can hear them yelping and assembly calling right after you release them.
Yeah. I was just kind of wondering, there's times where you bust a bird or whatever and, he runs away and you're like, son of a bitch, how far is he going to run before he finally stops?
Well, we have some data that are pretty crazy. We've had, so for one study I did, actually several we've done, we asked hunters to carry GPS units in their pockets. And then of course we had toms that had GPS on them. And we did have some instances where a hunter would bump into a bird and that bird would travel a mile or more.
Ooh. That
day. We had that's happened several times where the hunter, and I've posted some of this on social media, and does that happen every time? Right. No. Right. It doesn't happen every time. Sometimes the bird gets bumped and he literally just goes out of sight and then figures out a way to get around the hunter and goes about his day. But sometimes, for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason, there are some situations where he hightails it a mile or so and gets out of Dodge, and in some of those cases didn't come back. Oof. Like didn't return to that area. In fact, I posted this one, and maybe this doesn't happen a lot. I don't honestly know, but we did have this one bird. I think we've actually had three, if memory serves me. We had one for sure that I've posted about because we have a cool map. The guy got into him, heard him on the. We interviewed the hunter. He got to the bird. Bird was roosted. Bird flew down. They kind of played cat and mouse for a little while. The guy got up and moved a couple of times. Ended up busting the bird. The bird saw him, and that dude hightailed it about a little over a mile to the northeast. Left the public land he was on and went to a private track that was adjacent. And that was like the second week of the season. He stayed there the entire hunting season on that private land, and then returned to the area after the hunting season had closed. And we've had several birds do this. That to me is really comical because that tells me that that bird had done that before. And he, that's my suspicion. My gut tells me, you know what, that guy has done that before. And his reaction is, okay, yep, here these guys are in the woods again. I just interacted with one of them. I know that nobody hunts on, and nobody did hunt on that property. I'll go over there and hang out. And when I stop hearing trucks and gravel popping under tires and everything, then I'll go back.
That's crazy because I've thought about that a lot. And there's some times where, a turkey will kick my ass and I'm like, am I giving this bird too much credit or does he just really know what the program is?
Both. I think I do the same thing, man. I mean, sometimes I'm cussing and, back at the truck, like, son of a bitch, I can't believe he did that to me again. Man, he's just got my number. No, he doesn't have your number. Mike, Mike, don't be so stupid. Yeah. He's just doing his thing. He's just reacting to his environment and he's trying to make a living by not dying. So has he experienced that before? Yeah, probably, and does he know how to react to it? Yeah, but he's not thinking through. I mean, he's not, I think that's a hunter.
I think that's Mike over there.
He just knows that doesn't sound right. And in fact, I'm reading a book I'm going to start posting some of this on social media soon. Actually, I'm reading some of the classic turkey works from some of the pioneers that laid the foundation for me to come behind. And one of them is a guy named Wayne Bailey, who was kind of the godfather of restoration for turkeys. He trained people to trap and transport birds all over North America. And in one of his books, he wrote that if you kind of think about it from a turkey's perspective, a lot of the things we do raise suspicion, right? So a hen doesn't sit in the same place and call for an hour and a half. Right. So he was saying in his book, he's like, we, to your point, Andy, he said, I think we give this bird too much credit in some cases because you're doing something that they don't do in their world and you're expecting them to not react to it, which is nonsense. I mean, they don't. Yeah, if you sit there and he's in a tree gobbling and you tree yelp to him and then you tree yelp 20 more times, and then he doesn't fly down, so you get more aggressive with him. And he's just sitting in the tree thinking, okay, no hen acts like that. That's not something I've ever experienced. Therefore, I'm really skeptical of what's going on now. I think I'll just sit here for another 30 minutes. And I've done that. You've probably done that, screwed 100%. Up. And I was like, why hadn't this bird flown down? Why hasn't this bird flown down? Well, he hasn't flown down because he's sitting there thinking something's wrong. Something's not right. So instead of flying down and running into a potential problem, how about I just sit here and keep picking my environment apart to see if she actually walks over here, and if she doesn't, I'm flying the other way.
Right. Yeah, that happened last year to me, as a matter of fact. And it was like we were sitting there and I was like, I think he's still in the tree. But then like he would turn and he'd be facing right at us. And I was like, no, that son of a bitch can't be in the tree. He's on the ground. Like, that's so loud. That's so loud. He's got to be off of the tree. He's getting closer. And then he turned in the tree and it's like, son of a bitch, what is he going to do? What, like, and it was well into daylight when he finally flew down.
Yeah. I remember years ago when I don't profess to be a spectacular turkey hunter. I think I'd say I'm probably reasonably accomplished at it. And the reason being is I just try real hard. And the older I've gotten, I think I hunt a lot smarter than I used to. But I remember one time as a young man walking in on this bird, and he was literally choking himself. He was gobbling, and I'm getting so excited. And like I used to do, which I don't do anymore, I'm going to get to that next tree right there. If I can just get to that next tree, I don't know why I could have called him that extra 10 yards. I don't know, but I'll get to that next tree. And I got to that tree, and he stopped gobbling. And like an idiot, I yelped to him, and he shut up. And I was like, okay. So I sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there. And right before fly down time, he gobbles, but he's facing away from me. And I thought, oh gosh, man, he's close, man. I probably can see this bird in a tree. And sure enough, I could. So of course he could see me, or he saw something. That bird sat there until 9:05 before he flew down. And I had resigned myself. I said, I'm not leaving here until that bird flies down. Obviously, I don't want to spook him. Well, I'd already spooked him.
Yeah.
I'd already screwed up, In his world, he knew something was wrong, and he knew something was right there. And his ironically, when he flew down, he actually had moved around in the tree so that he could fly down. And I don't think he was going to fly down in that direction. I think he moved himself. He finally got impatient enough that he started moving in the tree, and he got to an adjacent tree. And once he got to the adjacent tree, then he flew down far enough to my left that I couldn't have shot him if I wanted to. And I've thought about that morning a number of times, because that bird just sat there until he had surmised that he could get out a different way, because he knew if he flew down, there was something that was trouble to him.
Yeah. It's crazy. I'm okay with getting my ass whipped. Like, that's, cause I understand, it's not like waterfowl. It's kind of a bittersweet moment when you pull the trigger and he's doing that flopping, because that is one less turkey for that property, there's not going to be another migration. There's not going to be a cold front that's going to push down another 10,000 birds. Like, you got what you got whenever you're turkey hunting. The resource is the resource. And if it's a bad hatch, you just took one more out of the environment. So I'm always kind of stuck in this weird dichotomy whenever the trigger's pulled.
It's paradox. Yeah. It's a classic paradox that, you're elated that you shot this bird. And I don't know if this is what you do, but what I often do is, I'm not thinking about any of that paradox when he's walking down the gun barrel. I'm resigned to, this is about to happen. I'm going to soak up every second of this. I'm going to look at every feather. And it doesn't always happen like this, but the scenario I'm talking about. He's coming right to you. It's all about to happen. It's 30 seconds away. I'm soaking up every one of those seconds. I'm looking at him. I'm in awe, and my heart's pounding, and then I'm on the site, boom, gun goes off, bird drops, hopefully. I'll often put the gun down, say a prayer, reflect, and then one of the worst parts of the paradox is getting to the bird and realizing he's dead. And, you hear people like breathe life into him so he could do it again. I don't kind of look at it that way. When I get to the bird, then I'm admiring him for as long as I possibly can. And then the most difficult part of the turkey hunt for me is breaking the bird down. That is the hardest part for me. I use every part of the bird that I can use, including hearts, livers. I hate making the first cut.
Yeah.
Because they're gorgeous and they lose their beauty once you break them down to the for the table. And it's a classic paradox.
I was hunting with Seth Fighter last year. We were lucky enough we got a bird, and the way that he admired that bird, it was his first Rio. I bet he just sat with that bird for 10, 15 minutes. He inspected every single one of the tail feathers and the beard. I bet he looked at the beard 10 different times. But I thought, man, this is a guy that gets it, because a lot of times we'll take customers out and bam, let's go put it in the truck and let's go start drinking beer. But the way that he really, really admired it, we hunted for 3 days really, really hard. And then kind of it was one of those, last afternoon, he had a fishing tournament the next day that he had to get on the road for. And it was one of those kind of a answer to a prayer. Bird came, absolutely perfect, read the script. But the way that he sat and admired the bird, I was really, really impressed with his post-hunt ritual, I guess it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I have buddies that do that as well. I mean I usually try to admire the bird as long as it's practical.
Yeah.
Um, I also have, I've hunted with people that do the exact opposite, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Hey, grab the bird and go. And I've always thought that, you're missing a real opportunity to slow down a little bit. And I'm the world's worst at this in my life in general is, you know, people that know me well will tell you that, I don't stop. I'll go until it's time to go to bed, and my feet hit the floor and I'm wide open until that's how I live my life and everything I do. But I don't do that turkey hunting. I used to.
Yeah.
I used to be the grab and go guy, and then I realized part of it is my job. But as I've gotten older and more mature as a hunter, I've realized that there may not be another bird.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone you get a chance to come across, sit there and take your time and relax and reflect on the hunt, take some cool pictures, um, you know, just soak it up because hell, for all you know, that may be your last bird. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, life is short, and there's only so many turkey seasons left. That's kind of the way I look at it. Is every time I cross paths with one of them, I'm blessed to do it.
Well, and you're doing things in reverse, right? Like in nature, hens go to the toms, correct?
Yes.
So I mean,
Yeah.
you're already flipping the script on the way Mother Nature had this game written, and you're getting him to come to you. So why not sit there for an extra second?
Yeah, I mean, in their world, you're forcing him to make a decision that in most cases he would not naturally make. He would, particularly if he's a dominant bird, he would stand his ground and you would come to him, and that's the way it's supposed to work, which to some of these, one of the passages that Wayne Bailey wrote is like, if you think about it in their world, you're already raising their suspicion,
Right.
begging them to come to you. I mean, so spring turkey hunting and fall hunting, if you're calling the birds, in a lot of ways is suspicion raising from the start. I mean, you're already throwing it out there that, hey, big guy, you need to come this way. And in his world, he's like, wait a minute,
Right.
That's not the way this works. And I think it's Tom specific too. Some of these birds, particularly 2-year-olds, they don't have enough experience to even know. We catch them as 2-year-olds going into their first breeding season, and that's why 2-year-olds dominate the harvest. They're stupid.
Yeah.
They don't have the experience to be skeptical of every blade of grass and every call and everything else. So they, a lot of times, whatever, they'll run to the call, and rarely does an older bird do that.
Do you like decoys or not?
I use them? Yes. In some cases, I don't use them on every hunt. I've found with some of the birds out your way, that sometimes having decoys is helpful at attracting some attention. It's bit me in some cases. I would say probably most of the time I don't use decoys.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I just call and try to set up in a situation where I get him to come to a spot that he's willing to walk to without seeing a decoy standing there, type of thing. That being said, yeah, I mean, I've shot birds over decoys, and I hunt with people sometimes that are religious decoy users. I kind of just go with whatever the flow is, but I'll be honest with you, if I'm moving around a lot, decoys are they're a pain in the ass.
Yes.
I mean, it drives me nuts. Let's go pick that up, put it in the bag, carry the bag. A lot of times it's like, wait a minute, he just gobbled. We got to go. And just boom, take off and go. So it really just depends.
I've got too much waterfowl hunter in me. I've got to have decoys out there, but like, I know it's going to bite me in the ass. Like last year, I was sitting in a place. It was like a pasture. This bird came screaming up, gobbling. I heard him way back into the property. He got to the fence line where he could see the decoys, and he ran that fence line for 15 minutes gobbling. Did not take another step, which obviously, you got the fence doing whatever the hell it does in a turkey's brain. But would not cross that fence, saw the decoys. He'd walk about 20 yards in either direction, gobble, and I know he was just waiting for her to come to him. I know that's what it was. But in my waterfowl mind, I'm like, come to the damn decoy, jump on this Jake, and let me shoot you.
Yeah, and decoys this is a question that obviously, and I know you've heard this as well. If you want a polarizing topic in turkey hunting, talk about strutting decoys, reaping, fanning, any of those techniques, and boy, you get people mad.
Oh, yes, you do.
And I have hunted over strutters, I'll call them Jake decoys, whatever, lay down hens. I've hunted with guys that's what they do. They put out the decoys and they use the decoys in every situation they go to. And I've hunted with guys, like that, and that's fine. That's what they do. I'm on their turf. I'm with them. I'm a guest or whatever it is. And I've seen decoys work just to a T, and I've seen decoys not work to the point where had the damn decoy not been there, it would have been better off. And in the science world, when I'm asked about, well, what effect do decoys have? We don't know. And people say, "Oh, Mike, you're just being political, bull." No, we really don't know. What I think is occurring is that the use of some decoys, particularly male decoys, is resulting in toms being shot that day that otherwise would not have died that day. Now, and people can debate that. That's fine. My own observations, I firmly believe that to be true.
Right.
That guy was not going to die today. Now, Tuesday he might have died. I don't know, but he was not going to die to that gun today without that decoy being there. And then I've been in situations where I literally thought, if that had not happened, if that decoy was not there, that bird was he was on his way, and then he got to where he could see that decoy, and he went, something's wrong. Something's not, whatever it is in his brain, something's not right. I'm not walking over there. And that's why when I get the question, all I can answer is there a potential that decoy use could affect harvest? Yes. The only two ways it could would be if it affects when the bird dies, the timing of the harvest, and the rate at which we're killing toms. If it doesn't affect the timing and rate, and mean what percentage we kill, then it doesn't matter. From a biological perspective, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't change the timing of when we kill them, and it doesn't change the percentage that we kill, it doesn't matter. Is there potential that it could? I think probably that, yeah, it could in certain situations, but we don't have the data to show it.
Right. What about reaping? Because I'm not a fan of it, and I'm definitely not a fan of it on public land. I think it's dangerous and foolish if you're behind a turkey fan on public property. You're asking for problems. But if you're on private land, it's hard to tell you what to do on private land. But I feel like it puts the hunter at an unfair advantage.
Here's the same topic. So basically, okay, does the use of a fan? Well, first of all, I'm not a fan of fanning or reaping.
Yeah.
Just from the standpoint of I personally, and this is what a lot of states, this is a concern a lot of agencies have, is it's such a danger to you as a hunter. And I mean, you're mimicking what we're killing. I mean, you're mimicking the behavior of the animal we're trying to kill. And on public land, that just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that it would be allowed. But to your point, on public land, on private land, it is what it is. Same question though. If the use of the technique doesn't change whether you philosophically agree with it or not. If the use of the technique doesn't change when the birds are dying and what percentage are dying, then does it matter that they died coming to a fan or walking into a food plot with a pop-up blind on it?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, honestly, from a scientific perspective.
Right.
And that's a question right there that is really hard to answer. Is that, like, does this technique change these metrics that agencies care about? I mean, designing a study, I've talked about this with colleagues, is designing a study to really give rigorous data on that topic is extremely difficult, bordering on nearly impossible. And that's largely why we haven't tackled it. It's just, I mean, how do you design a project that exposes birds enough to this technique to see whether it influences when and how many are killed?
Right.
It's a tough topic.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's just like anything. You see it online, and, your automatic gut reaction is, well, this just works every time. But nobody's going to post a video when the reaping didn't work. They're only going to...
It doesn't work. It doesn't work all the time.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't. There are, and I don't fan of reap, but I'll give you a scenario. I was on a hunt last year, won't name who or where. I'm sitting there with one of the best callers in the world. He has got this bird coming to us. There's several of us with a video running. This bird's on his way. He's doing the old 5 forward, 3 back, 5 forward, 3 back. He's on his way. I mean, he's going to take him 10 minutes to get there, but he's on his way. And again, the calling was exceptional, as it always is with him. And suddenly, this bird, you see his fan, and all of a sudden, his fan drops down, and his head picks up, and he takes off running at us from about 80 yards away. And then so fast, the hunter could not react to the bird and get the bird, shoot the bird. The bird was past the hunter, coming to a fan that none of us knew had been elevated. Uh-oh. And the bird literally went absolutely haywire in amongst us, called all the hens to him behind us, and was gone. And there was a situation where it probably should have worked, but it didn't, because you prompted something in this bird that you couldn't anticipate. And I get people criticize it, and they ask, what are your thoughts on it? My thoughts are pretty simple. Like in that situation, I saw it do something to a bird the bird could not turn off.
Right.
He could not turn that reaction off. It prompted a behavior that in their world is not tolerated. I'm standing here with my hens. You're 75, 80 yards away, and you dare. I'm a dominant bird, and you dare to throw a fan up in my face. That gets your ass kicked in my world. And I'm coming to do it because that's what I do. I'm the ass kicker right here in this area. In that vein, I saw it with my own eyes, and I've seen it before. That bird was prompted to do something that he could not turn off, just like when you shoot a bird and he's got a buddy with him they're not buddies, and you drop a bird and the guy beside him jumps on him and starts head pecking him and flailing him and going crazy. And you get up. I did this the other year. I got up and walked up to a bird that was doing that and got nearly within arm's reach of him before. And had I not spoke to him and kind of rushed him, I think he would have stood there. I have a video of a bird that a buddy of mine shot. He comes in, pile is 3 times together. He drops the third bird. I told him, the third bird looks like to be the biggest bird to me. He shoots the third bird. First bird runs off. Second bird jumps on the third bird that's now dying. He finally subdues him by laying on top of him, like squatted down on top of him, and starts picking his snood up with his bill. And the dead bird snood, picking the snood up and dropping it, picking the snood up. He drops his wings on both sides of this bird, laying on top of him, and actually lays his head down on top of the dead bird's head and just lays there. And the person with me is whispering to me, "Have you ever seen a bird do that?" And I was like, "I've seen a lot of this. I haven't seen this particular behavior." And I'll never forget this. I started clucking at the bird to try to get him to, just get out of here. So and I'll never forget this. He turns laying down and looks at me with the most evil, sadistic in his eyes. It was evil. He was livid. But he didn't know what to do. He had attacked this bird and head pecked this bird, and there was a reaction in him that was so visceral that the only thing I think this bird knew to do was to lay down on top of his adversary and attack him by the head, knowing the other bird's not reacting, but I'm just going to keep on pecking at. I'm going to keep on. I've got my body weight on him. I've won. And then he hears something to his left, and he looks at it, and it was hatred. It was absolute hatred in his eye. And I told the guy with me, I said, "Dude, you may never see anything like this again." And of course, I'm sitting here with a cell phone videoing it, so it's not the best. But to the whole question of the decoys and the reaping and all this that we talked about, it's controversial. People get mad, and I'm sure somebody's going to listen to this and get mad at me, and that's fine. I've seen it with my own eyes that some of these things trigger a reaction that the bird can't turn off, and at that point, it begs the question of is that the way that it needs to be done? And I'm not answering that or judging it. I'm just saying that's what causes me pause is when I see a bird do that. I'm thinking he could not turn that off. I mean, a human being is standing there over him.
Yep.
The ultimate form of predation, like the ultimate predator, is standing there over him. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Those are the instances that cause me to think about it, and I don't have the answer, but it's compelling.
It's a philosophical question. It's do you want to? It's like decoying ducks and geese and pass shooting. Some people pass shooting's fine. Other people like to play the game of cat and mouse with ducks and geese. And I mean, it's just a philosophical question of under what circumstances are you okay with pulling the trigger on this bird? If it's flying over you at 50 yards and you've got the firepower and that's what you want to shoot into that flock of snow geese, then whatever. Some people like to set out.
Yeah, and I mean, from the standpoint of these techniques, if they're legal, and there's no information suggesting that they're changing these metrics that we've talked about, then who am I to judge what someone else is doing legally, right? On the flip side, as a turkey hunter and someone who's seen it with my own eyes, I'm in this constant conundrum. It's like, well, does it matter? I don't have the data to tell you that it does.
Yeah.
Does it influence the probability that bird dies that day? There is absolutely no question in my mind that it does. And it can. Not always, but it can. And then it begs the question, well, does that matter? And we need the data.
So the toms running around together, they are not buddies. They're just friendly adversaries until one of them makes a mistake. Is that kind of the relationship that they have together?
It varies from, in some cases, they're brothers, like they're true siblings, hatched out of the same clutch. And in some situations, it's the exact opposite. None of them are related to each other. And within that group, there's a dominant bird, and whether whether the birds that are under him are his siblings or half siblings or not related at all, from an evolutionary standpoint, is irrelevant. When push comes to shove, which is why you see that behavior. I mean, how many times do you shoot into a group of toms where there's 2 or 3 of them, and when you kill the one, there's no reaction whatsoever by the other 2? I mean, it happens a lot, right? So they're tolerating each other, and this may be more than you're wanting to know, but there is research showing that the larger the group, the more successful, the more mating opportunities that the dominant bird in that group gets. So group size matters. And the reason it matters is more draws more attention, right? Mm-hmm. So if you got 4 or 5 toms sitting there strutting and gobbling and attracting hens, that's better than 2, right? So logically, you'd kind of think, well, you get into these bigger groups, and they're not buddies. They're displaying because there's a fitness benefit to attracting attention. If you're standing around other toms attracting attention, then there's a chance you might get to breed. Right. If the dominant bird's not present, maybe he goes over here. Maybe you watch one of the hens leave and you follow her. You get out of the eye of the dominant bird, and you're able to sneak a copulation with a hen that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten if you were by yourself, right? So it makes sense to hang out with other toms and be part of the process, even if you're not the dominant bird in the group.
Kind of like being at a bar with your buddies. You know, maybe they're relatively good looking, and you can attract a crowd of females. You know, your big buddy goes off, and you know he's dancing on the dance floor, and it's like, hey, I got this little sweetheart. She might not be a 10, but hey, I'm not getting laid any other way, so let's see where this goes.
Yeah, attract attention. In the turkey world, that there's pretty solid data showing that being part of a group is better than being by yourself.
Right.
The other thing that we've seen, which is really interesting, is we just did an analysis on this, that when you start shooting members of those groups, the survival of the remaining members declines.
Oh, really?
And that begs the question of, okay, so what's going on here? And what it appears is going on is you got this, let's just say we got 3. You got 3 birds that are hanging together, and you shoot one of the birds. The other 2 birds now change how they're behaving. Maybe one of them goes over here and hangs out by himself, and then one of them goes over here and hangs out by himself, or they get together for a few days, and then one of them takes a hike and goes a mile down the road. They become less predictable in how they behave. They're not doing the same thing every day that they were doing when there were 3 of them. And I think that's what's going on, is you shoot one, the group changes its dynamics a little bit, and the next thing you know, one of them ends up somewhere he hasn't been. And he lives a few days and he gets shot. And then the third one now is completely alone and survive. You know, to me, it's kind of logical how it works out. It's just interesting that it does, because that would then translate to what we already knew, which is bigger is better, right? So a big group of, like, say, 6 toms, I think that would be much less likely to happen, because the group could remain intact.
Right.
You're right. You could take multiple toms out of it and it could remain intact. Whereas if you only have 3 or 2, you shoot one, the other one is alone. Now has to change how he's behaving.
Now, how long can a dominant bird stay on top of the heap? You know, is there like a magical window of like 3 to 6 where the dominant bird is like, at what age does he lose his reign?
Typically when he dies.
Really? So once he becomes the top bird in the woods, he's usually there until he dies.
Yeah. Unless, and a lot of this is based on work that was done decades ago. This is a hard question to get at, because you either need to be able to see the birds, which obviously you can in a lot of cases. The work that was done on Rios, actually. It's based on imprinted birds that are raised in captivity and imprinted to humans, where they think you're a turkey, so
Right.
you can watch them behave. And yes, those data suggested that if that bird, the dominant bird, isn't removed, then once he establishes dominance, he stays there. Um, Now, obviously, things could happen. He could get injured. He could get, whatever, and not actually die. And those around him would perceive a weakness and assert their dominance on him. But all things being equal, as long as he is alive, he typically would remain dominant.
Now, that pecking order, does it get reestablished every year so long as everybody is there that next? Because I'm assuming it's February 8th right now. Is that pecking order starting to iron itself out now, isn't it?
They've been testing it for months now, and they will continue to do so on into the breeding season. But usually by the time you start seeing strutters out and about and everything looks real calm inside that group, yes, dominance has already been sorted out at that point, and that's why you don't see constant fighting. Everybody strutting. Everything looks to be very calm. Well, that stuff was sorted out in November.
Oh, that early.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when toms get in their winter flocks, they will assert dominance within those flocks, and then when those so in other words, you might have, let's say you have 10 toms that are together, you got a group of 5 and a group of 5 that joined up. With a group of 5, there's a dominant bird within that group, and then the other group of 5, there's a dominant bird inside of that group, and when they get into winter flocks, they just kind of chill out because, hey. We're around other birds that we don't know. There's no point in constantly bickering and fighting, but you'll see kind of this, hey, I'm not going to let this guy just keep doing, I'm going to challenge him. I'm going to chase him. Usually that's within these groups that got together to form the bigger group, rather than trying to fight everybody. Right. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to do that. So yeah, by the time like now, when you drive down the road and you see a group of strutters out and a bunch of hens, they're calm because dominance has already been asserted.
Now, do hens go through a similar process to where they're the boss hen?
Yep. Hens do the same thing. They have a pecking order within their groups, and same deal. And if you get to watch turkeys in the fall, you see this. You see a lot of chasing and constant contesting of resources and space, and well, she found something over there, I'm going to go run over there and see what it is, and that's them sorting out that dominance so that once they get to breeding season, it's a very orderly progression of what happens. And what that is the dominant hen breeds first, and then breeding goes down the pecking order, and then when it's time to start nesting, you see the exact same trend. You see hen number 1 of this group, she starts nesting today. Hen number 2 starts tomorrow. Hen number 3 is on Friday. Hen number 4 Sunday, and you see this very orderly progression. That's the way it's supposed to function.
Right.
The dominance dictates. And if you think about it, in their world, that allows there to be no chaos. That allows things to be very orderly. And that's a positive from a reproductive standpoint, because you want everything to happen quickly. You want everybody to nest quickly. And because if you do, nest success is higher, right? So if everybody nests within a short period of time, that's a good thing. So having these dominance hierarchies that structure their populations and makes everybody do what they're quote unquote supposed to do and stay in line, that has fitness benefits for the entire group.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson, and he's always talking about the dominance hierarchy and how, and just like you said, creating order out of chaos. And it's just crazy that a bird has figured out a way that everything is orderly and everything is structured and everything is in this neat little box so that it's not just willy-nilly everywhere. And it's crazy.
It's funny because they start doing that when they're a couple days old.
Really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, poults will start asserting dominance over one another when they're very young. and those pecking orders dictate their entire life. Like there's constant testing of each other from the time they're very young until they become whoever they are in the population in that group, whether they're dominant birds or not. That is something that influences their day every day of their lives, is
Yeah.
dominance. Where are you in the pecking order influences every day of your life. So if you think about like some of these things we've talked about, why did the bird react that way when you shot the other bird? Well, geez, I mean, he's 2 years old. And so for, every day for 2 years, he's been shaped by this guy that's beside him, right? That has been head pecking him and jostling with him and pushing him down the pecking order 2 years in a row from the time he was 2 days old. Damn it, he's down. This is my opportunity, right? And that's why they can't turn it off, if you will. It's like, man, I've been dealing with this every day, and now the button just got turned, and I have an opportunity to move up in this pecking order because dominance matters. So
Right.
I'm taking it out on my buddy, if you will.
Now, at what age is it where we'll start seeing a bird make it from next year? What's kind of the danger point that they grow out of to where it's like, okay, I'm a viable bird and my odds of making it into adulthood are basically 100%.
We used to think that if they could make it to 2 weeks when poults start roosting off the ground, we used to think that was, if they can get there, that's pretty good. They got a pretty good shot. And if you read any older text, that's what it said, that once they're flighted, they're good. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that's not the case, that you will continue to lose poults when they're 3 weeks old, 4 weeks old, 5 weeks old. Do they die as precipitously as they do when they're a week old? No. But one thing that we're seeing, and we just don't understand what is going on, females, hens, for reasons we're getting close, I think, to having a pretty good idea of what's going on, but we're not quite there. They are not making it into the fall population in many of our southern areas. In other words, when we go catch birds in the winter, groups of hens, we often don't catch any juveniles that were hatched the previous summer. And if we do, it's not many. Whereas you see jakes commonly in some of these same populations. So there does appear to be a sex bias, that the juvenile hens are not making it proportionately like the juvenile males are. So to your question, again, we used to think 2 weeks is good. Now the data suggests to me that it's later in the summer, that there's mortalities that are continuing to occur later after that 2 and 3 and 4 week period that are being reflected in our trapping data, because our trapping data are essentially unbiased. You shoot a net over 20 hens and you catch 18 of them. If 2 of them are juveniles and 16 of them are adults, even the 2 that you missed, if they were both juveniles, which who knows, it still doesn't change the fact that there's almost no young birds in these hen flocks. So that there's something going on there, and we're trying to piece that together.
Your best guess right now, I know it's not finalized, but why do you think that there's a sex bias here?
I think what's going on. So there was a researcher years ago named George Hurst who studied turkeys for much of his career, and I worked under him as well. And he would just say that, when times get hard, meaning brood habitat conditions or environmental conditions are bad, that the jakes went out. In other words, and what he meant was, when you get a poult that's, say, small chicken size, and they're hanging around the hen. Let's say they're 2-3 weeks old, and you get cold, you get rain, you get stressed, whatever it is. These birds gravitate towards the hen. And George's point was there's only so many birds that can get up under that hen, around that hen when she's brooding. When you get in a pinch, you go to mom. And you can only fit about 4 of those birds under her. And George's point was, in a bad year, he thought most of those birds that were able to make it work and stay and compete against their other brood members were males. They were bigger, they grew faster, they were stronger, they were more aggressive. And as an aside, our average brood size in the summer across most of my study sites is 3.5, just under 4 birds. My suspicion is that as brood habitat has continued to deteriorate in quality, as I travel around, that's the number one limiting thing I see from a habitat perspective is quality brood cover, because it is very specific. It's not like nesting cover where if she can hide in it, she'll nest in it. And I think probably what could be happening, just my hypothesis, is that these birds are hatched. They don't have good brood habitat. You start seeing poult death. There's not as many insects in the environment as they need. They're not growing as fast as they should. Therefore, they're not flighted as soon as they should be. They spend more time on the ground. They spend more time foraging than they should. And what that does is it causes their growth rates to slow down. And when times get tight, which they are every year in the South, there's only so many birds that are going to survive out of that brood, and they're going to be mostly males.
That would make sense.
That's what I think's going on, which would then allow harvest in the spring to either stay the same or decline at a different rate than the female portion of the population was declining. In other words, if you were producing mostly males that were surviving, then your harvest could hold on, if you will, while your female flock was declining at a greater rate than your male flock.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I can't prove that, but I have enough data to at least make me look at it and go, that is a plausible scenario. Not saying that's what's happening, but it's plausible. That could be at least part of what's going on, is that. And if so, it would help explain some of the data we have where we've had populations declining in some areas, but the harvest wasn't declining it that much. Like it was either staying the same or it was just declining really just very slowly through time. Maybe that's an explanation.
Yeah, that would make quite a bit of sense, actually. So last question. I know you're a busy man, and we've gone over an hour and a half. I'm fascinated by all of this stuff. But the birds that I did not shoot last year, are they going to be waiting for me this year? And are they thinking of me like I am thinking of them?
Well, I'll answer the second one first. No, they are not thinking about you at all. They're hoping they don't interact with you.
Yeah, I understand.
But your first question, yes, we just published an article, a peer-reviewed article, using a massive data set of GPS and telemetry marked males, showing very, very clearly that spring harvest is an additive source of mortality, meaning if you don't shoot them, they will be there next year.
Good.
So, yes, if you don't get a crack at a bird and you're bummed at the end of the season and damn it, I wanted to kill him so bad, chances are he'll be there next year. Just give it another go.
What's the upper limits of how old a wild turkey will make it before it naturally gets out of the ecosystem?
Yeah, most of the birds that we have marked as jakes, meaning we caught them as a young guy, put a band on him, and then the band is, somebody shoots the bird down the road. Most all of them we are reported by the time they're 4 or 5.
Okay.
That being said, I personally have, in our data set, we have had toms that were 7, 8, 9 years old, but that's not common.
Right. About 5 years old is the upper limits.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. And that, that kind of makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if most of the birds that are jakes are shot when they're 2.
Uh-huh.
If they're going to be killed, most of them are killed when they're 2. So if when we looked at the data that we had, about 50% of all the jakes that were going to be shot were shot when they were 2 years old. They were shot when they became a 2-year-old, about half of them. And then from there on, it's like, 25% were shot as a 3-year-old, 15% were shot as a 4-year-old, and I don't remember the actual numbers, but I think I'm pretty close. And then some very small percentage were shot as 5-year-olds. So what's going on is some of those birds are truly living to be 5 and are being shot. Some of them are dying of old age.
Right. Yeah.
Either dying of old age or being killed by a predator at some point.
Yeah. Are you going to be at NWTF?
I will.
Perfect. Yep. We're going to be there too. I'd love to shake your hand and buy you a beer or something, or continue this conversation. It's been very, very fascinating. I love getting off into the weeds about these things. So I'll hunt you down at NWTF and at least shake your hand and introduce myself. So,
yep, I'll be there. I'm speaking on Thursday at the opening event, and then I'm speaking twice on Thursday in a research session that anybody can attend, and then again on Saturday at a kind of a Q&A that we've got a Q&A set up where people can come and just ask any turkey question, and we'll try to answer it. If we can't, we'll just say, I don't know, type of thing. But that's actually Saturday at 11:15 is the Q&A, and it'll be on the agenda. Anybody can come, and last year it was really good. It was well attended. People had some awesome questions about some of the things we've talked about and many other topics. It was pretty cool.
I'm trying to think of what it would be like hunting a place that's got geo-track turkeys on it. Like if I had that data on my phone, I could be like, oh, that son of a bitch, he's just right around the corner.
So you target him.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah,
no, I know that.
We don't make it available.
No, I know that, but I don't know if I'd like that or not, because then I'd realize how many times I'm getting stood up. Like, oh, he was here and he just didn't even play the game with me. That might be a big bummer.
I'll give you a parting thing before we go. Is years and years ago, when we were putting the first GPS prototypes out, we had to get the unit back off the bird to retrieve the data.
Uh-huh. Right.
So, and we were trying to perfect these units. We were trying to perfect the technology. So we had put 3 out on 3 toms on a public hunting area, and 2 of them had been killed. So we had gotten the data back, and they worked great, and we were jazzed up about it, but we hadn't gotten that 3rd bird. So we actually took telemetry gear and went and hunted that bird. And even knowing exactly where he was at all times, knowing how close he was to us, knowing that he was there, he was coming, he was to the left, he was to the right, he walked away, we never killed that bird. And honestly, at the end of the day, I sat there with the student that was with me, and this was later in the day, and we were just to be honest with you, we were pissed off, and we were tired. And we just sat against a tree and talked for a long time. And I remember telling, his name's Justin. I remember saying, Justin, this was not fun. This was not fun. And he goes, no, this sucked, man. And I was like, it really did. It sucked. It sucked knowing he was right there, and it wasn't coming. It sucked knowing, okay, he's going to the left. It's like, all the anticipation was gone, and it was a job, and it's like, I don't.
Yeah.
So I don't even want to see it.
Well, perfect. All right. Well, be safe traveling to Nashville, and I'll bump into you next week. Thank you so much for your time. You've been more than generous with your time. So,
Not a problem. It's good talking
Thank you
to
so much. And we'll
Thank
see you next
and
week.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Yep.
All right.
See you soon.
Wild Turkey Doc on Instagram. That is where you can find him. He's going to start posting more research on social media. So turkey season's right around the corner. I'm fired up about it. I've got a lot of amends to make from last year. I ate tag soup.
You ate tag soup, huh?
Yep.
All right, I got to get out of here. I got to talk to a kid that's going to be on here from South Africa that has gotten ran out of his farm, his family's farm, and pretty terrible story. We're going to have him on and talk.
Pretty awful story.
It's a horrible story about what happened to him.
I've got a cousin that's married to somebody. Similar story.
Well, we're going to have this guy on, and hopefully next week get it on before turkey. If not, come by and see us. We'll be at the Boss booth. Come by and see all of our sponsors. Will be at the podcast or at the Turkey Convention. Look forward to seeing you. Peace. Bye.
Goodbye. Love you. Bye. Watch for deer. Check out all of our great sponsors. Go check out Double T British Kennels, Mossberg, Stanfield Outfitters, Alpha Outdoor Specialties, Hemp Hill Farm. Use the promo code BHP. Ducks Unlimited, Lucky Duck, Looking Glass Podcast, Shin Gear, Dirty Duck Coffee, Dive Bomb Industries, Pacific Calls, BHP 25, Boss Shot Shells, and MLR Graphics.